I want to talk about black content creators. You see a lot of black content creation, and you are a black content creator. But a lot of us are making a lot of mistakes when we're trying to build a brand. What is one of the things that you see like y'all should stop doing that? We gotta stop doing this. We're hurting
Yeah, I love
ourselves.
that question. I love that question a lot because it's almost like when you at the family cookout or the reunions and you're hanging out with your cousins and them, and they're like, "How can I step up better?" And you like, "Stop doing this,"
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And for all of my cousins out there listening, I would say I see we make the mistake of we don't brag enough.
yeah. Mm,
We don't carry our receipts. I think receipts are so important in today's job economy because if you think about it, a lot of people do what you do, right? Let's start there. I don't pull any punches when it comes to this. A lot of people are good at what they do.
yeah.
A lot of people have your job title, they work at your company, they want to be where you're at. But what sets you apart is your unique story and the way in which you tell your story, your narrative, and your ability to answer the question, well, why me? I think society does a disservice because it's taught us as Black creators that our Blackness is not a superpower. And
Mm,
it absolutely is. Being able to code switch, being able to speak English and African American vernacular English, right? Or Ebonics or whatever you want to say. Like being able to straddle these worlds is a superpower that other people don't have. And so when I tell people all the time, like, talk your talk, I'm saying it from the sense of like, don't be cocky, right? Because we all know that one person who talk a whole lot, but they can't
yeah.
fight in the club well. Like they can't fight. But I mean, like, bring your receipts, show why you are a unique value add, show how your experience has positioned you or your experiences have shaped you. You know, a lot of Black creatives, we know what it's like to juggle multiple jobs. We know what it's like to have a non-linear career path. That is your superpower. And so really when I'm talking to a lot of our creatives, when I'm talking particularly even on like LinkedIn and how you position yourself, don't get so caught up in figuring out how to brand yourself as professional. Learn how to brand yourself in the sense of if someone didn't have you on their team, what are they missing out on? And that is where your
Hmm.
story and where that superpower lies.
How do I know if my LinkedIn profile is costing me opportunities versus creating opportunities for me?
I love that question a lot because we always need to be asking ourselves if we're losing out on the money or if we're attracting it. I would say a couple of things that you should think about is if your LinkedIn is accurately portraying the person you want to be seen as in the rooms that you want to be in. We have a really dope episode on Let's Talk Offline around personal branding. And I say on that episode that you are a brand, whether you want to be or not. Like we all are a brand because rooms that you're not in, somebody is saying something about you. And even though you can't necessarily control where people talk about you can control what is said. And so when you're looking at your LinkedIn profile, you need to be asking yourself, am I telling the proper story here? Am I reflecting all of my experiences? Am I utilizing my creativity? I'm always perplexed when I talk to creatives and they're not being creative. Like, see your LinkedIn profile as an opportunity to be creative. And there's so many ways you can do that. If you love to write, your about me section should be fire. I'm not talking about that whole like it looks like you just spit it out in AI and it just came out. Tell a story. Who are you? Where did it start? Where did your passion start? Where do you uniquely add yourself to the conversation? If you like to write, you can explore obviously your feed and post, you can explore your newsletters. But a really amazing format that we've seen continuously grow at LinkedIn is short form video, right? I'm talking like your 2 minutes or less vertical videos. It doesn't have to be fancy, it can be shot on the phone. Those are so great because you can still provide professional insights, which is where LinkedIn is unique to, right? Like, but your professional insights are still through the lens of how you see the world. And so, like, I always like to tell the story that, you know, I was dealing with somebody in my life who I looked up one day and I was like, bro, you're a hater. Like, you're an actual professional hater. Like, whenever whenever something good happens for me professionally, like, you don't know how to show up. And so I made a video about that and I posted it on LinkedIn. I'm sitting on the bathroom floor, I'm doing my makeup, and I'm talking about professional haters. And I'm sharing how you need those people in your life. You need people who doubt you. You need people who don't believe in you because that builds character and it makes you see who really has your back in the good times and the bad. I looked up and within 24 hours, I had gotten over a million impressions. To date, that's one of my best performing videos on LinkedIn with over 3 point some million impressions and more. And that video alone showed me people want real. People want real. People want authenticity. People can smell fake a mile away. And that's on the platform too. So I always say, find unique and creative ways to tell your story. That's not going to cost you a bag. It's going to actually attract, because the type of opportunities that came after that were great. People then really wanted to tap in more, particularly with the podcast, because they were like, oh, like this girl's just going to keep it real. She's going to be honest. She's silly. And so I would definitely say, like, taking the time to look and say, like, if I were a recruiter or a hiring manager, if I was an investor, if I was a sponsor, if this is all I saw about this person and I didn't do my due diligence to look them up on any other platform, which most people don't, you got one shot. Is this reflecting who they are? And I say that you gotta know how to do that professionally, but also in a way that is true to you. Like, I don't ever want anyone to see any of my content and they don't see my personality. They don't see what I uniquely bring, because at the end of the day, when I'm in that room, I'm gonna bring it. You know what I mean? And so I think, like, that's where a lot of people make the mistake. They're not exploring the creative ways in which they can tell their story, and they're not seeing themselves as a brand. The minute you start carrying yourself like a McDonald's or a Coca-Cola or a Chipotle or any of these other household names, is the minute that you can just control the narrative and you attract the opportunities that want to tie to that narrative as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, I want you to go further on that. And I'm going to ask you this from a different perspective, is because you talked about leaning into who you are, leaning into your creativity, leaning into your culture, leaning into your blackness. How
Mm.
has black representation in media evolved to allow us to be able to do that and it not be off putting?
Yeah, I was privileged to go to an HBCU. Shout out to Howard. Shout out to all my Bison family. It's all love, no matter where you went, right? But I always got to put a little extra on for the Bison. Um, I was very blessed that growing up, I was taught a lot about my culture. Being from like the Washington D.C. Northern Virginia area, I was always surrounded by that, whether it was in the church or being an actor in community theater or then going to an HBCU and learning. And I think what I've seen in media, particularly over the years, is like it's not all just about telling a certain narrative or a story. When we talk about us not being a monolithic people, we're often talking about it from the lens of, okay, we don't all come from a major city or we don't all come from a certain socioeconomic background. But very few times are we actually saying, when we say Black people are not monolithic, we're also talking about a diversity of thought. We don't all think the same. And I think nowadays in media, you can find a little bit of everybody on social, right? You can pop out your phone and you're going to see the celebrity gossip sites, but you can also, find a podcast like yours or mine where we're talking about other topics. Like, I like to show people I'm from round the way, as our uncle Denzel Washington says, but I'm also a Black girl in tech who can show you that you don't have to become anybody else to win. You are enough. And I think, like, what I would like to continue to see is more of our stories continue to take over in media to show people, and especially this next generation, you don't have to do certain things in order to get ahead. Like, you get to define your destiny. You get to define your story. And who you are is enough. Because let me tell you something, Will. When I first started out, as a journalist and then as a blogger, and I was working in fashion and beauty, I was trying to paint myself a very specific way because that's all I saw. I saw all the other Black girls in fashion move in a certain type of way or act in a certain type of way. Now, one of them things, I couldn't do all that because I wasn't as skinny as them. Okay. Your girl had hips, and I was like, I ain't gonna be able to do no sample sizes of nothing. All right. And so I was like, okay, now I gotta find my own style. I gotta find my own flavor. And I remember just looking up one day and I was like, this isn't me. Like, a couple of my friends even called that out. They're like, who you paint yourself to be online is cool and all, but like, that's not you. And it really kind of put a battery pack in me to say, I am robbing myself. And more importantly, the people who are assigned to me by not being true to who I am. And I just want more people to see that. I want people to hear it. I want it to get deep down in their spirit. Who you are is enough, and that authenticity is what is going to differentiate you from anybody else, any day of the week. I don't have to be nobody else. Everybody else is taken, as they like to say. Jamé is not, and I'm gonna tap into Jamé because when Jamé is Jamé, ain't can't nobody else do Jamé, you know? And so I think like for media, we're continuing to see more of our stories take place. And when this opportunity came about for Let's Talk Offline, I'm not gonna lie, I was just like, y'all want me?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like me, like I don't know about that, because I've also been very open and honest about the idea or interpretation of what Black professionalism looks like. And I was like, okay, cool, I'll do this, but under the understanding I'm not sugarcoating things. I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna be real. And in a lot of our episodes, I talk with my co-host Gianna, and I tell her like, your experience is yours because you're not Black. You know
yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean? And you might shake up the table a little bit, but it needs to get shook. Like it
yeah.
needs to get shook because we're doing too much of this. Let's be sweet. Let's be kind. Like no, let's call it for what it is. Because at the end of the day, I want the next generation of young Black professionals, young Black creatives, young Black entrepreneurs, change makers, thought leaders to say, okay, I know what's ahead of me, but I also know that like me being true to me is enough and I can open those doors.
Yeah, I want to talk about personal branding on LinkedIn because I think there's some value you can help a lot of us with in regards to this. Is so there were some boards I used to sit on, and I remember going to those boards, and those meetings would typically be at like the end of the day, and everybody would come to the board meeting with suits on and et cetera. And I'm like, after a while, after going home to change clothes or put on a suit, because I don't wear a suit to work every day. I work for myself, and this is what I look like going to work. I'm like,
Right.
I'm not going home to put on this suit anymore. I know I'm adding value to this board, so I'm going how I now I'm gonna be appropriate, but I'm not going
Mm-hmm.
home to put a suit on. And so my question is this: is so often we have this view, specifically on LinkedIn, like when you said, you sitting on your bathroom floor talking about professional haters, and I'm like, a lot, like many people will be afraid to put that video on LinkedIn. And I'm
Yeah.
like, Instagram's a place for that, TikTok's a place for that, whatever, wherever's a place for that. But on LinkedIn, like, oh, that's some guts right there. And so I want you to talk about the misconceptions people have about personal branding on LinkedIn. Because in my view, it was a lot like I'm gonna be who I am in this professional
Mhm.
space because I know I'm adding value. So I'm okay
Yeah.
coming with what I got on and not going home to put a suit on, which is what I felt
Yeah.
like so long on LinkedIn. I got to be this on LinkedIn. I can be this over here on that other app, but over here I got to be this.
Yeah. I I think what you felt going into those meetings and saying like, no, I'm gonna stand 10 toes down on who I am is exactly the same thing you should have when you come to LinkedIn. Now, don't get it twisted. I was sweating bullets before I posted that video because now I'm thinking to myself, my manager is connected with me on LinkedIn, like my
Yeah,
coworkers connected, like they gonna think I'm talking about them, and at
yeah,
the end of the day, a hit dog will holler. Whoever it's for is gonna pick, right? But but I think I had to ask myself, is the reward worth the risk? Is the reward of who this piece of content can bless or inform or help, is that worth the temporary risk of feeling uncomfortable that I put it out there or that nobody is going to vibe with it? That's kind of the job of being a creator. You listen to what you know you need to put out there and you put it out there with the hope that it touches people, but whether it touches one or it touches millions, you've done your job. What I would say though is that if you ever are feeling like nervous about that, like do a self check in. Are you nervous because it's new and it's foreign? Are you nervous because you think somebody is going to judge you? Or are you nervous because really, if you sit with it, you're like, this is not an appropriate topic for me to talk about? And I didn't have that last one. I knew that this was just uncomfortable because I had never seen anyone talk about that particular topic on LinkedIn before. Now, the thing is, LinkedIn is still a place, yeah, you go and you find jobs, right? But like, it's so much more than that. And this is where, going back to one of your questions before about where we're making a mistake, we are still approaching this platform as a job search platform. Our counterparts are not doing that. Our counterparts are showing up on this platform every day, building community, networking with people, sending people happy birthday in mails, right? Like
yeah,
posting the
yeah,
video, being okay with looking cringy or like weird at first as you learn how to hold a phone or how you learn how to, put B-roll. People are becoming comfortable with failing in front of people, and it's actually building the community that is then going to give them the economic opportunity that they need later on. And so what I would say is still see this platform as a place where yes, you show up in a certain way, right? Like I wouldn't cut up on LinkedIn a way you gonna see me cut up on Instagram stories,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah, yeah,
brunch is not necessary for this platform.
yeah.
But I have learned a lot of the topics that we're thinking about, if it applies to work, it can belong on LinkedIn. You just have to ask yourself, how do we analyze this? And this is actually something that, as we were really thinking about our episodes, because for instance, like for Let's Talk Offline, we're talking to Gen Z and early career professionals. But there's two things here. One, no matter where you are in your career, everybody can learn something about navigating a toxic manager, right? Or building workplace friendships, or finding a mentor or asking for that first promotion. Everybody can learn from those things. But you also are trying to figure out, okay, how do I do this in a way that doesn't just feel like it's just scattered? It's still speaking to like one individual person. That's where your LinkedIn profile comes in. And that's where like you get to build this unique audience of people who may follow you on other platforms too, right? Like I've had some people who I've bought in from my LinkedIn persona, and then they come to my other platforms and they're like, you're the same person. It's the same thing, Will, as like who you are around your parents might be different than who you are around your grandparents, different from the
Yeah,
church folk,
yeah,
different around
yeah.
your boys. Like everybody gets a piece of you, but it's not that you're not being true and authentic. You just know how to move in each individual room. So you got to ask yourself and think of that the same way for your LinkedIn profile. But I would definitely say we are uh, underestimating our ability to know how to tell our story and to still attract the people that we need to attract. Get that fear out of it, post it, take a walk, go get some coffee, go do whatever you got to do, get on the game, right? Whatever you got to do.
Yeah.
And you'll start to see little bit by little bit showing up authentically each day builds that audience and that community, people who come to respect you for just being real.
So social media platforms, I should say, have increasingly become like portfolios, for creators. So how should creators think about then their body of work?
Look, I always say receipts are currency. You know what I mean? Going back to this idea of like why you, if I'm a recruiter, I want to see like what have you done, and what do you have to offer that somebody else may not. And sometimes those are the smallest deciding factors between you and another candidate, whether you're looking for a job or you're looking for whatever else. I've posted everything from short form video clips. I obviously post the clips of the podcast, right? Because think about it. There's always going to be someone who that's the first time that they've ever discovered it. And I love that idea. I don't remember who I was talking to the other day. I was talking to somebody and they were like, this creator? And they show this creator to me on their phone. The creator has millions, like tens of millions of followers. Well, if that person had been walking down the streets of New York, I would have never known.
Yeah,
I've been like,
yeah.
I've never seen this person a day in my life. And it was such a wonderful reminder to me that we think everybody has already seen everything. No, you got to keep putting your stuff out there, and you got to be very bullish about being your own marketing professional. Like you got to get the stuff out there. So everything from internships that you've had to essays to campaigns or events. If you have a podcast, are you posting your clips online? That's creating a funnel for people to go watch the longer version. If you have it with video or if it's just audio, are you constantly driving back people to where they can find more of you? I think that like if you really sit down and you think about all of the dope projects or the things that you've touched, nothing is ever lost, right? And this also comes down to transferable skills. Now, I'll tell you something. As someone who is also an actor, one of the things I've had to learn is that how the industry was years ago is not what it is today. Years ago, you did the traditional, I'm going to keep auditioning. Hopefully, I get booked. I get enough projects. I get an agent, and then the agent takes over. Nowadays, there's so much more people than the work.
Hmm.
So, going back to this idea of how you're going to stand out, this is why you have actors nowadays who are script writers, who are directors, who are teaching all these other things because you can't be a one trick pony anymore. And so this is not just in the entertainment space, this is for everybody. So if you're not getting the opportunities, create the opportunities yourself. All right. You don't need all this fancy equipment to start recording video. You don't even need all this fancy equipment necessarily to start a podcast. Start, create the minimal viable product, create a proof of concept, and show people here's what I can do with this. Because if I could do this with this, imagine what I can do with a lot more. And I think this is where the portfolio comes in. If you can show people you already are that person, right? Like I always like to tell people, I was always that girl. I just got a little bit more money, but I was always that girl. But I proved myself to be that girl when I was, at a lower place in my life, so that it only was natural that as more opportunities came, I could continue to elevate. You got to see the same way for yourself and the same way for your portfolio, and particularly for LinkedIn. What I like about LinkedIn, and it's not because I work here, it's because I've just genuinely seen it, is that you can marry so many of your communities here. If you like video, there's a place for that. If you like audio, there's a place for that. If you like to write, there's a place for that. Like I have so many different communities in my LinkedIn portfolio, quote unquote, that I really like. And I just think that like we got to just keep tapping into that. But at the end of the day, show those receipts. Show the receipts.
Like that. What advice do you give to content creators who want to advocate for themselves? They want to put themselves in a position to have deals, brand deals, get picked by, these brands who want to engage, but they're growing, but don't know how to pitch themselves. How do you do
Mm.
that?
Man, look, as an entrepreneur myself, I can tell you I've pitched myself both good and very bad. Okay, I'm very thankful that I made a lot of mistakes privately, because now when you get a little bit more public, you kind of get a little bit more leery of making mistakes. But I'm very thankful for that time too, because I do think we all need a training ground and stuff. I always tell people, like, are you perfecting yourself in the private? Because once it's public, what's a showtime is showtime. You know what I mean? Everybody wants something. Everybody wants this idea of what they think success to be. But I always ask myself, are you preparing yourself for that? Because you can get it, but then
Hmm.
what happens, right? It's like the same thing as people want the $1 million brand deal. But baby, if you can't even juggle the $500 brand deal, your deliverables are late, the product is trash, you have poor communication skills. How are you preparing yourself for that bigger blessing down the road? You know what I mean? And so when it comes to pitching, it comes down to, again, the proof of concept, and it shows and this idea of showing your receipts. It's also about being bold. And as I've gotten older, I've come to realize, like, you just got to take the risk. You got to take the risk, but calculated risks, right? Like, I'm very calculative in the sense that, like, I'm not just going to go into anybody's room and ask for something. I'm going to come knowing that I have something to bring, and here's where the value is. I would definitely say, like, being someone who is confident in what you have to offer, but also being okay with being rejected is good too. Not all money is good money. And I know people don't want to believe that. And I know, particularly when you're trying to pay them bills, you really
Yeah.
don't want to believe that. But sometimes saying no to things is actually a setup for a bigger yes later down the road. And so I always say, when you think of that pitch, ask yourself, like, what are the biggest things that this person needs to know about me? How can I show how I have already done this, right? Like, how have I already operated in this space in some way? And this is where transferable skills comes in. Like, what have you done that's similar to this that you can speak to? And then lastly, how do I position myself in a way where, like, I'm showing you I am the person for the job, right? Like, we actually talk about this in an episode too, where we're like, someone, how do you, when you first come out of college, and everybody is like, how do I get the job? And then we're all like, do I put the job that I had at Starbucks, do I put that down on the resume or not? And some people might be like, nah, don't put that down. But like, the pushback is, but if there were transferable skills of you working, I've had a lot of jobs in retail, a lot of jobs in hospitality. And let me tell you something, that built me for good customer service, that now as a community manager here, I got to know how to talk to people, because sometimes people be trying you and you can't just say whatever you want to say. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just say, like, use every opportunity and experience you have had, and craft the narrative as to how that built you, but also how you added to it. Numbers are always going to win. So quantifying your successes, quantifying anything you can, helps tell a brand a story. But then also being a good person also goes so far. People like to work with good people. People like to work with kind people. So if you can present yourself to be someone who is collaborative and fun and engaging, who comes with creative ideas, but then also you have those receipts to back it up, I think you're good.
You manage a community of more than 17,000 on LinkedIn. You run your own side business, also more than 90,000 people you serve there. Um, how are you how are you distributing your content, making sure that you're serving these folks well? Are you cross pollinating your content? Is it the same content across places? Like, how are you doing that in two different directions?
Yeah. I would always say like we all only have a certain amount of hours in the day.
It's
So
that.
if I create a piece of content, everybody about to get this content, right? Yeah. Everybody's about to see this and we're going to see it a couple of times. I definitely believe in boundary setting, particularly when it comes to work. So for me, like, even though my, teammates and the company and everybody knows like the things that I work on the side, like I do believe it is very important for me to distinguish the Jamé Jackson brand from the Jamaican community manager brand. And a lot of people sometimes be like, no, merge, merge, merge. But I'm like, that's where I think we have to also say, like, I have to have some type of ownership on something too, right? And so for me, I think like creating content, I'm always looking for what is the thorough line between my audiences. My audiences for the Jamé Jackson brand are a lot more black and brown creatives. It's people who have watched me grow up through the ranks, people who saw me move from DC to New York, people who saw me try to go from fashion and beauty to then journalism to now acting and then also working in tech. And my LinkedIn audience is a lot more expanded, right? But particularly, it's like, okay, but you also have to figure out, well, what is the thorough line here? Everybody is always trying to figure out, how can I be better?
Hmm.
Everybody is always trying to figure out, what are the new trends we're seeing? What are the new things we're seeing in the job market? How do I stand out? It's a tough job market. You know what I mean? And so I always like to speak to what's the commonality. The differences are okay, right? Like if you want to see me do like the super blackety black combos because that is what I'm going to do, there's a platform and a space for that. But when I also think about how can I service my audience, I'm also thinking like, where can I get the most bang for my buck? And for me, I find like the commonalities of helping people show up authentically, figuring out how do you build your personal brand? How do you build your own personal mission statement? How do you build the confidence to take up space? That allows me to cast everybody. And sometimes that's what you need. You need people, you need the messaging that is going to touch more people because then that draws back. People are like, okay, cool, I like it. Let me check out what other content she creates. So let me see what other things that she does. So yeah, I think boundary setting is so important, as particularly as a creative. Ownership is important, but I also think that when you just show up and you share the content that you know is going to really matter to people, then that kind of, you make the sell there, right? This is why I also talk, because I work with a lot of sales and marketing professionals, and I'm always like, stop telling people you got the best product on the market. You know what I mean? Stop, because that doesn't do anything for me. If you tell me, I have the best coffee in all of New York, that's different than you telling me like half a cup of my coffee will keep you up to finish that job proposal you've been working on for 3 weeks or something like that, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
show, don't tell. And I think as creatives, we have to show your impact. You don't tell us you're impactful. Anybody can say that, but
yeah, yeah.
show me.
I like that. I like that. I cannot get out of here without asking you about AI. You knew it was coming and it's here. So I think about, well, actually, I'm just asking, what kind of tools are you using to help streamline your workflow? Like, are you using AI? What kind of AI are you using? Like, what do you suggest based on the kind of content you deliver people should be using to get, to make more impact and do it
Mm.
efficiently?
Yeah. I mean, it's really cool because I'm seeing like so much excitement for AI, especially around like Gen Z and millennials, who are really thinking that AI is going to help them progress in their careers. And I believe it. I had the honor and privilege of attending Afrotech for the second or third time a couple weeks ago, and
Hey,
AI and
yeah,
innovation was something we talked about a lot. And it's interesting because I think that as much as we're talking about it, so many people are still being left behind because they're scared. I think we should embrace it, and I think that we should explore how can we start leveraging things like AI skills and AI learning. I mean, one of the things I always tell people is, first of all, LinkedIn has LinkedIn learning courses, right, which you can sign up for, and you can actually learn a lot about AI. You can at least start to learn the immediate jargon, right, of things that like you might not know, or like you might have questions about, to just at least familiarize yourself with it. For me personally, I like to use AI for a lot of things. And so, like, for instance, like when I'm mapping out my week, I will use like a Claude or a Chat GPT to say, like, okay, here are my biggest priorities of the week. Help me prioritize based on X, Y, and Z variable. Yeah, 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 yeah. As a writer or as a creator, sometimes I'll even think of like, okay, here's the topic that I want to touch on, and here are some like key talking points. Like, help me at least create an outline. Now, here's where I think people make the mistake, Will. People are using this AI and then they just spit it out and then they just posting it. And you can tell. I'm like, now you have never been able to formulate a sentence a day in your life, and now all of a sudden you're
You
writing
writing
like
500 words. You guys crazy.
right. Right, exactly. So I definitely say like see AI as a partner. Don't see it as something that like is going to take away from your creativity. It can enhance your creativity if used properly. And I'm just kind of I'm just I think that this is just a skill that we're going to continue to see. The great thing about AI, I think, is that it doesn't just touch the tech market, right? Which is I think is a lot of people's mistake. They think AI is only touching tech.
Facts.
If you can start to familiarize yourself with AI, large language models, what machine learning, what all of these terms mean, and how you can get a piece of it, you won't be behind the wave when we see, because we've already seen the first wave of AI happen. But I think we haven't even seen yet all of the
Yep.
possibilities of what's going to happen over the next few years. This is where we start to build. When we talk about building that generational wealth, when we talk about getting into these roles that are going to set us up, when we talk about how we can be the pushers of culture, because we already are. As Black people, we already push the culture. We create the culture, but then we allow the culture to then dictate what we do. No. If you know how to move and if you know how to put yourself in the rooms, you can dictate the culture. And you can dictate the culture because at the end of the day, it's not just about what you can do for you. At the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, how can I use these gifts, talents, and skills to further my community and further other people who may not have access to the things that I have access to?
Hey Jackson, so good talking to you. This was good.
Thank you, Will. I appreciate you. Now, look, I'm gonna have to go look at your LinkedIn profile now.
Hey, do that for me. Tell me I need to spice it up.
I was gonna say I'm gonna have to do some vetting and make sure it's all good. But yeah, no, this was dope. Thank you so much.
No, I appreciate it. We'll have to do this again.
Bet.